Greetings and salutations, and thanks for clicking on the video. We're going to take a look at 10 very useful Linux commands today. And some of those commands might end up being a 2-for-1 deal, because very often in the world of Linux there is more than one way to skin a cat. I'm doing this video because I've had a lot of requests lately from people who want to dig a little deeper into the system and learn more about it. And I have mentioned a lot of these commands in past videos, but I figured it'd be kind of neat to put them all together in one place. Most modern day Linux distributions that come with modern desktops have all of the point and click tools that you could possibly ever need to run your system on a daily basis. However, there's a whole new world that opens up when you open up the terminal, and once you start learning more about what you can do there, you really begin to see the power of Linux, because with just a few keystrokes you can do all kinds of amazing things with your computer. You can see things that are going on in the machine, and the more you learn, the more you'll end up opening up that terminal. I use a lot of these commands on a daily basis and don't even think about it, because they've just become part of my computing experience. So I'm hoping that you guys get something out of this. Some of these are pretty well known and some of them are a little bit lesser known, so let's see how this goes as we roll through. The first command I want to show you is kill all. This command is very useful if you have an application on the machine that is misbehaving, like your web browser locks up and you can't do anything with it, and just clicking on the little X or whatever doesn't close the application. Also, a lot of times, especially with Firefox, the GUI will close, but Firefox has still got crap running in the background. You try and open it back up and it says another Firefox is running. So if you run into this type of situation, this is a command that might help you. Basically, this just tells the system, just kill that program, make it go away. And for demonstration purposes today, you'll notice that I have a file manager open, and since we're using Linux Mint 17.3 with the XFCE desktop, the actual name of the program for that file manager is Thunar, so we're going to put that in there, and then we're going to issue this command. Boom, it's gone. It went away. I just killed it. And this is kind of a last resort thing that you want to do, to use the kill all command, because if you have any data that isn't saved or anything like that, you're going to lose it. It's just like a hard kill, where the program will have no opportunity to write any buffers to the disk or anything like that. Also, it doesn't work every time. It depends on a lot of things. First of all, the program has to be running under your account. If that program was launched by root or has any root processes that are associated with it, then it may or may not close. You can always try putting sudo in front of kill all and getting rid of it. But if that doesn't work, then you may have to open a more complicated application like HTOP that will allow you to go through and find all the processes. But I'd say about 90% of the time, just kill all Firefox takes care of that problem if Firefox locks up, or Google Chrome, or anything. So let's clear the screen and we will move on to our next little command here. Now, this is a really fun command, and it does a lot of different things, and I'm going to show you all the things that it does today. So before we get into this, I want to go into a directory that I created in my home directory so that we have some place to work. And we're in the junk directory right now. And the command I want to show you is touch. And when you hear what touch does, you might think, that's not really all that useful. But as you roll along, you will find all kinds of reasons to want to use the touch command. It's insane. I remember when I was first learning about this command a long time ago in computer class, that I thought, what am I going to do with this? And I actually end up using it quite a bit. So let's first talk about the first thing that the touch command does, because it does several things. It creates files. So we'll just create a file and call it file1.txt. Alright? So if I issue that command and get no output, then it's created the file. We can see if it's in the directory by listing the storage, and as you can see, there is a file there called file1.txt. Touch will also create multiple files. So I can have it create file2.txt, file3.txt, and so forth. So let's go ahead and have it create that. And we'll once again run ls to see if they're there. And you see I've got a bunch of these little files. Now, there's nothing in these files. They're just empty files. But sometimes when you're going to do something like create a document or something like that, you might want to start out by creating a file. Most desktops will allow you to create an empty file by right-clicking. But if you want to create a whole bunch of files, then Touch will allow you to do that. So that's the first thing that Touch does. It creates files. The next thing that Touch will do is, and this is really very useful, is that if you touch a file that already exists, it will create, or actually it will modify the time, the access time on that file. So for whatever reason, if you want to just like open a file and close it very quickly to change the time, then you can do it. And that becomes very useful when you're dealing with backup programs. A lot of times backup programs look at the date of a file, and if it hasn't changed, it won't back it up since the last backup. If you touch the file first, then the backup program thinks the file is actually changed, and it will go on and copy it. So you can force that to happen. Sometimes you might run batch processes on a bunch of files, and for whatever reason they don't get updated, the times don't get updated, and you may need to do this manually. You can just do that. So if we wanted to run Touch that way, let's just first of all, let's do ls, and we're going to do a long list here, because that will show us, you can see all the times there that these files were created. Alright, so now we're going to run Touch, and we're going to give it a wildcard. So everything with the TXT extension, I want Touch to touch. It did it. Didn't appear to have done anything. So let's just go back and issue LSL again. And as you can see, the times have all been updated. So that's the second thing that you want to do with Touch. The third thing that you can do with Touch is to create flag files. A flag file is a file that you stick somewhere in the system that tells the system to do something. And it's just an empty file with a name. For instance, you can get the system to run the FSCK procedure at boot up. FSCK, file system check, will go through and make sure that your drives are okay and that the file systems are all right, and if there's any problems, it'll fix it. Sort of like check disk in Windows. And if you want to get the system to do that, then you would issue this command. Let's start at the top of the screen for this, and that command is sudo touch, and you got to create the file, and we want to put it in the root directory, and that file is called forcefsck. Alright, and enter, and of course it's going to ask for a password because we're running as root. Actually, we're using sudo. It didn't like my password. There we go. It did it. And so the next time that I reboot this computer, what's going to happen is that it is going to take a moment and check out all the partitions on the drive and make sure that the file systems are okay. So that's all you need to know about Touch. There's actually more to it. You can look it up if you want to. It's a very useful little command. Insanely useful little thing. Alright, clear the screen. We'll move on to our next command we want to talk about. Here's a command that is another one that I thought I'll never use that when I first heard of it, and I actually use it all the time. We're going to look at the which command. Now, the which command tells you where a program is in the computer. When you install programs on a Linux machine, it places the actual executable code in any one of several different directories. So you may end up in a situation where you install a program and it doesn't automatically create a launcher in the menu. Sometimes that happens. So you're sitting there going, well, did it install? Is it even here? If you know the name of the package, you can look for it this way, and then you can manually create a launcher in the menu or on the desktop, and you'll have access to it. Another reason that you might want to use this command is if you're writing scripts. We talked a bit about scripts in a past video here where we were looking at the cron command. When you write a script, it's always a very good idea to give that script an absolute path when it's going to open up a command or a program, because you can't necessarily assume that that program is going to be in the path statement if it's going to be running on different machines. So therefore you tell it exactly where the program is, and in order to be able to do that, you'd have to be able to know where the you have to know where it is so you can give it that information. So let's find where Geary is, which is my mail client. And so which Geary, and it tells me exactly. It's in /usr/bin/Geary. Let's do that for another one. Which Google Chrome. Did I spell that right? Nope. See, now it tells us exactly where that is, and it's in the same place, which is, a lot of the times they're going to either end up in the bin directory or user/bin, somewhere like that. But it'll tell you exactly where it is. So that's how you use which. Okay. Here's another really useful command if you run into a situation where your internet just quits working. And you open up the browser and it's not there, or the browser just stops working, and you're trying to figure out what the problem is, whether it's the browser or whether you have connectivity. Or if you are setting up a machine and you've started out just by installing a base system, you don't have a browser on the machine yet, you want to make sure the network is working. Here's how you would find out. That command is ping, and to run ping, we would give it a web page to look for. So in this case, we're going to look for google.com. You can use any web page you like. This is also a good way to see whether a web page is up and running. So if you can't get it in your browser, you can open up a terminal and you can see whether it's answering. That way you know it might be something wrong in the terminal. But in this case, we're going to use Google. And I'm going to tack it with C and then 3, and I'll explain what that does after I run the command. So here we go. Now what it does here is it runs a couple of pings. It's actually just sending a little packet of information out to the site, and it's asking the site to please tell it that it's there, and it'll tell it how long did it take to get through the network. There's a lot of good information here. The reason why you would want to tack it with C and then put 3 in there is because if you just run ping this thing's going to go out and do this like 64 times. So if I just put 3 counts in there, that's enough to make sure everything's working. And if you start this way and you want to kill it, just Control C. That'll kill it. So there's ping. Very useful command that you can use. Alright, so let's clear the output and we'll start with our next command. This one is one that I don't think I've ever shown you guys. You may be familiar with the commands to open up, like Nano, which is a text editor, and you can use that to read files and modify files and things like that. And I know that in past videos I've talked about cat, which is a command that does the same thing. It just types things in files. So if I type in cat etc fstab, because I got to look at this is a system file, then this is what I'm going to get. It's going to go and read that file, and it's going to print the output in it on the screen. Now, of course, we're talking about text files here. This doesn't work with word processor files and things like that. So simple text files or configuration files, this is where it becomes very useful. The problem with cat is that if you try to cat a long file, so let's cat long file.txt, which is a file that I put in that junk directory before I started the video. It just rolls it off the screen. Now you could, if you were in a terminal emulator like this, you can use your mouse and scroll up and read the output if you wanted to. But if you were running, let's say, in a TTY, which doesn't necessarily have that functionality, or you're looking at a really long file, that's not really a good way to do things, is it? So I'm going to show you this command, which is less. And actually, less is more, because this is an update on an older command called more. And I'll show you what more does after I show you less. So let's go long file.txt. Now it has opened it in such a way that I can use the arrow keys and I can scan up and down through all of this text one line at a time, or I can use the space bar to page down and get down to the bottom. I can also use the home and end to move around, use those keys, and it will respond. Now when you're done with your file, just click Q and then you'll get out of it. And let me show you this one thing. This is kind of an extra, but it's an old way of doing it, and some of you might be more familiar with this if you're longtime computer users. Okay, so we're going to use the cat command, right? And then we are going to tell cat that we want to open up long file.txt. Okay? And then we're going to use a pipe, which on my keyboard is below the backspace key. There's a slash, and then above the slash there is the it's the backslash, and then above that there looks like what is a straight line that could be two vertical lines on top of each other too. What this is going to do is we're going to take the output of the cat program and we're going to put it into the input of the more program, like that. So this is what we'll end up with. It's pretty much the same deal. Okay? It's an old way of doing this. And more doesn't have quite the same functionality, like the arrow keys don't work. The only thing I can do is page through one page at a time. But it's left in the system. It's an old legacy command, I guess you could say. So anyway, there's the less command. You may find that quite useful. Of course, if you're just looking at small files that you know are less than a page, cat does the trick. So what is next? Oh, here's a very useful command. Linux obfuscates the drives that are connected to the system. You don't necessarily see all of the devices that are connected to the system. So if you plug in a USB drive and it doesn't automatically mount, or for some reason you're not seeing where you can find a hard drive or something like that, then you may want to get a list of all of those devices that are on your machine. Also, you may find that you move things around a little bit or you change something, and then all of a sudden something is not mounting automatically, like your swap partition or something like that. So you need to find out what the UUID for that is, which is the universal identifier for a drive. The way the Linux system keeps up with drives is that it issues them an ID, and if that drive happens to move around in the system, you unplug it from one plug and put it in another plug, like with a SATA drive or something like that, it will still be able to find the drive. So you need to be able to list those drives so you can find that information. If you should have to find out what the UUID is, find out whether the drive is actually connected to the system. So I'm going to show you how to do this. It's sudo blkid, and now it lists all the drives on my system, and it shows me the UUID for the drives. So we have the two ext4 drives. One of them is my system partition, one of them is home, and then you can see where the swap drive is right here. So it shows you where that is. So if you were looking for your swap file because that stopped working. And then we have a couple of drives that are, this is actually a drive that contains Windows 7 that never gets booted, but it's here. And it's hooked up to the machine. So that's a very interesting command that you can use, and that's blkid in that situation. this is less of a command as it is a mode on a command that you already know that you might not know about. So when we issue commands, as we need administrator privileges to do that if we're running in Ubuntu or Linux Mint or a lot of distributions these days, we use the sudo command, and that allows us to act as the root user. In Ubuntu and Ubuntu-based systems, the root account is usually disabled. It's locked. It's not there. You can't really log in to the root account and act as the root user. However, there's a way around this. What you can do is instead of having to issue sudo after every command, you can kind of emulate being the root user. So we would type in sudo, and then we would give it the argument s here. And then there I am. It logged me in automatically because I just used the sudo command. Ordinarily with sudo, what it does is that if you issue a command, and let's say that you put in sudo apt update and the machine updates, the next time that you put that in, it won't ask for the password. There's a timer that's running, and it runs for about 30 seconds or something like that. And if you don't issue another command with sudo, it locks it out. That's for security purposes. This way, we're just basically saying, no, I want to act like I'm the root user on this system. So every command that I would issue from now on would be done as root with root privileges. So I wouldn't have to put sudo in front of it. Now I must caution you that this is a dangerous way to run your system because you are effectively logged in as root. So if you put in the wrong command, like you run the password command here, then you could activate the root account. There are some commands that you can run that will trash the system. You could get one little letter wrong in a command and end up doing big damage. So use this with extreme caution. But if you know you're going to be doing a lot of root-centric commands, this is the way to do it right here. So there you go. You want to get out of being the root user, you type exit, and it puts you back to a normal prompt, and you become yourself once again. And so from now on, to do anything, you would have to issue sudo before you would do a command that needed privileges. The next command is sort of related to that. It is the ability to switch and become another user. So let's say that somebody's on the computer and they're doing something and they're logged in as themselves and you want to log in as you. You have administrative privileges and for some reason you've got to do something like install an update or something. Well, instead of logging them out and then logging yourself back in or using the switch user thing in the GUI, which takes a time to load, you can very quickly become yourself even though the computer is logged into another user. And you can also become other users to issue commands. So if you want to just jump into somebody else's account for just a minute, and let's say a past example I used was BleachBit, you want to go through and clear out the caches and do some maintenance type stuff, you don't have to log out and log back in and open up the GUI. You can just become them. So let's show you how that works. So it's SU, and in this case I'm going to become Cindy because she has an account on this computer. Now the password it's asking for is Cindy's password. So I put it in. I know Cindy's password. As the administrator on all of the machines on my personal network, I know all the passwords. So I can become anybody else at any time. Isn't power great? So I'm now logged in as Cindy, but you can see that it's still in my work directory there. So to get into her account, make sure that I'm in her home directory, I just put the tilde in. Yeah. Let me do that again. CD tilde. There we go. And now I am logged into her home directory and not mine. Now, once I am done playing around in Cindy's account and spying on her and whatever I'm doing here and checking up on her, I can get out by typing exit. Yeah, it would help if I typed it correctly. So now I'm back to being me. Very useful little command there. Many of you, if you've been around Linux for a while, if you use a system that uses the root account, in other words, the root account is active, to get into that root account, just type in SU and it will ask for the root password, and bam, you're there. Don't do that in that's not going to work in Ubuntu or any system where the root account is disabled. So, and that's another command that you have to be just a little bit careful with, because you don't want to accidentally activate that root account. Alright, we're up to number 9. I haven't been counting these down. We're up to number 9, and this is a really useful command. And this command is sudo reboot, which will do exactly what it says. If I would hit enter here, it would ask for my password to make sure that I had administrator privileges, and then it would restart the system. And that is nice if you're working in a terminal and you've run updates and you want to make sure that everything is the way it should be. You know that there's a kernel update. You can go ahead and reboot the system from that. That's also useful if the desktop quits. A lot of times, if the desktop freezes up, you can get a terminal open. In Ubuntu and Linux Mint and many other distributions, the key combination to start a terminal is alternate control and T. And even though the desktop may not be responding, you may get a terminal to open up. If you get a terminal, then you can restart the system using reboot, or if you'd like to see what's going on, you could use more advanced stuff like htop to see what wasn't responding and all that stuff. But 9 times out of 10, if it locks up, you just want to restart the system. Now, even if you cannot get a terminal emulator open, you may be able to get a terminal open anyway by logging into a real terminal, which is a TTY. And we've talked about this in past videos. Alternate control and any of the F keys, F1 through F6, will log you into a terminal. I cannot demonstrate this in this video simply because of the fact that if I did, I would actually log in as another person or on another account here. Actually, I would log in twice, and while I did that, this account would stop working. So it won't work in the video. That's what I was trying to say. But if your desktop just freezes completely up, but the computer continues to run, then you can do that and log in there. There'll be a text prompt. You log in, give it your username, give it your password, and then you can reboot the system from there. So it's a lot. That's the last resort that you want to do if your system is not working, is to just mash the power button and hold it down for 5 seconds, because that can cause all kinds of problems and trash the system, and it may not boot properly again. You really want to try and get the system to go through its shutdown procedure. If it won't and it hangs up and there ain't nothing you can do, then you're going to have to do a hard reboot using the power switch or disconnecting the power or whatever the deal is. And one more command that goes along with that is the shutdown command. So with the shutdown command, you also have to have administrator privileges, but it gives you more flexibility. So if I want to shut the machine down, then I would issue the command this way: shut down with a argument H, which means I want to halt the system. I want it to stop. I don't. There are actually other things that you can put here. If you put an R there, then it will reboot the system. So it does the same thing as sudo reboot, but there's less to type if you just type sudo reboot, okay? And then you have to tell the system when you want to do it. So if I would hit this now, this computer would go into shut. It would just shut itself down and it would power off. But what really makes the shutdown command useful is the fact that you can give it a time to shut down. So let us do shutdown, and spell it correctly. And we're going to tell it that yes, we really do want to stop. And then I'm going to give it a time to do this, and we'll do it in minutes. So if I want this system to shut down in 15 minutes, I would issue the command this way. Now, sudo was still not timed out, so therefore it just took the command. So what this is going to do here is that this is going to actually shut this system down in 15 minutes. It'll just go down. This is extremely useful if for some reason or other you want to go to sleep listening to music, for instance. You could just, it could sit there and have it play music for 90 minutes and then shut down. And then it would actually do it that way. So once you've issued this command, you don't even need to leave the terminal open. I'm going to close the terminal here. That's still running. But what if we change our minds and we want to get out of that? So let's open our terminal back up. We would come back and we would issue this command. Sudo shutdown C. Alright. Now what this is going to tell the system to do is ignore that shutdown command that's running. And there you go. Now it's not running anymore. We didn't get any output, so we know it worked. And the last command I'm going to show you, number 10, is probably the most useful on the list because it helps you to learn how to use all of the other commands that we've talked about. And that command is man, which will open up the manual page for any command that is currently installed on your system. So the other day I was talking about BleachBit, and I couldn't remember exactly what syntax to use to make it do what I wanted it to do in the demonstration I was giving. So to find out, I just ran man BleachBit, and now it opens up the manual page, and you can go through here and you can find what exactly you need to do. And it gives you all the options, and it gives you the basic information there. If you have a web browser open, great. You can just like do a search online. You could probably find more detailed information. But for quick reference, very quickly, and you're just trying to figure out how to use something, and you've got a command you know that will work for you, but you just can't remember exactly what all the options are and how to put everything in. You can't figure out the syntax. Man is the way to go. And if you want to learn how to use the man command, you can type man. And now we have how to use the man command. All right? And not everything in the system has a manual page. Like real simple commands like cd, which is change directory. There's no man page for that because it's just a basic system function. There's really not much more you can do with it. But you might be surprised what does have man pages. Like let's do man ls. Look, there's all of the options that you can use for the ls command. And let's see, man. Let's see if there's one for the move command. Yes, there is. So if you want to know how to rename files or move things around on the system, there you go. A lot of GUI type programs actually have a man page. Just out of curiosity, let's see if Firefox has a man page. And it does. So this is everything you need to know about Firefox if you, for some reason, you want to run it from a terminal. So that's a very useful command indeed. Now, usually sometimes there's better information on the internet, as I said earlier. And if you're not sitting in a terminal and you want to learn deeper things, I suggest going out and finding documentation online. But that should get you started, at least if you want to know how to use something very quickly. So there's the video, 10 commands that are totally awesome and very useful. And I will recap here. We talked about kill all. We talked about touch. We talked about which. We talked about ping. We talked about less. We talked about blkid. We talked about sudo with the s argument, which makes it permanent. We talked about su, which is switch user. We talked about reboot. And finally, we talked about man. Have fun playing with your Linux systems. If you'd like to learn more, check out Easy Linux on the web. Check out the Easy Linux Facebook page as well. And if you do, please give it a like. And also, if you're into reading about Linux, I definitely recommend you check out freedompenguin.com. Freedompenguin.com has a bunch of articles contributed by lots of people, me included, and there's always something interesting to learn there. So thank you for watching. We'll do it again soon.